Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Hilliard Guess. He's the director of New Dimensions, a documentary on the explosion of surf music in Southern California in the 60s. He's a writer on the Amazon show Deadly Class. He's a script doctor, an actor, and a producer on a dozen different projects along the course of his career in entertainment. He's also the host of the Screenwriters Rant Room, which is one of our favorite podcasts, a weekly show where he and his guests explore the craft of filmmaking and storytelling, music, culture, life, and how we all relate to each other. But most of all, he's our dear friend, a huge advocate of the Break It Down show. He's given us and our mission so much more than we can ever show our gratitude for, but we sure will try. I love him. I know Pete loves him. He's our Uncle Hill, even though we're the same age, and you're going to love him too, but not as much as we do. Get out your notepad. You're going to want to soak up some game. Here he is, our man, Hilliard Guess.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy, Hilliard Guess, and you guys are listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
What's up, y'all? I'm Hilliard Guess. I'm a writer, director, producer, podcaster, and I currently am a writer on a TV series called Deadly Class. I'm out right now developing a bunch of shows through my agent at UTA, and I have a couple movies. One is I have an option that's about to expire, but we just found out that now they just got it to another big director, the Sylvester script.
Oh, okay, good.
And then, so now we're moving to another star, because the other star we had just got a new TV show, which happens. You know, sometimes people wonder, like, why did they cast that person? It's like, actually, who they had at first was probably somebody different.
Yeah.
You know, but you end up with who you end up with because of schedule sometimes. And sometimes they end up being the right person.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'm currently, in the middle of producing, I directed and produced this documentary about this band from the 60s called the New Dimensions. They were a surf band from Beverly Hills. The interesting thing about them, they were like 12 to 14 years old, and they used to open up for like the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, like all the big groups back then, the Ventures, and they were called the New Dimensions. And they were a lot younger than everybody else. So they made 4 albums and never quite made it. So 50 years later, they came back and went, let's put the band back together and make a new album. Well, as soon as they did, one of them died, and that was Jimmy Greenspoon, who was one of the founders of Three Dog Night. He was the keyboard player. And then the other one who passed away just literally like five months ago is Danny. He was one of the saxophone players who played with like the Wrecking Crew and all those guys like that. And then the biggest guy in the group was this guy named Michael Lloyd, who's one of the biggest producers in town. And he's most known for producing Dirty Dancing, the movie. All the soundtrack and all that stuff. So we're in post on that now, finally.
Yeah, finally. It's been a while.
4.5 years we've been working on this thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I've lived down here 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you came to the set that one time.
I came to the set before I'd even moved down here. It was around that time, but yeah, it's been a long time. But that crazy-ass, super leany chimney that I was like, that thing's going to fall on somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that project, and then you have the Black Wall Street project, too.
The Black Wall Street, that's actually doing really well for me. It's been, sometimes you write a script and you have hopes that you're going to sell it. And sometimes you write a script and it's just a great sample. For example, I wrote my Sylvester script years ago, and that script has gotten me so many writing assignments because sometimes a topic or a story that you write has lots of different things in a script that work for what a producer may be looking for. Sure. Maybe looking for a story about somebody who can overachieve or somebody who can, whatever the theme is, and you might have the right script that speaks to that, even though it's this music biopic.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the same thing is happening right now with my Black Wall Street script, which is about Tulsa, Oklahoma back in 1921. It was bombed by the Klan, and they destroyed 36 blocks of this very successful black neighborhood.
But slow down there. How many blocks?
36 blocks.
So it's not like 2 blocks or 3, but like all of them.
All of them. There was one building remaining, and it was the closest one to the white neighborhood.
Yeah.
So that'll tell you right there. So that's my baby right now, but it's really getting me. I mean, every place that we've sent it to has wanted to meet me. So I've been on what they call a water bottle tour, where I send the script to you, for example, Phil. You read it, you love it, you just want to meet. It may not even be in your mandate of what you guys are doing, but it's like, who is this writer? You know, so that's been really getting me in a lot of doors.
Yeah.
I've been on there every week, 4 or 5 people I'm going to meet, you know, all the time. It's been fun.
Yeah.
You know, and what your job is, and I'm always trying to teach this to young writers, is to, you know, that you're just going in because they just want to meet you, but how do you turn that into a job?
Yeah.
Right? So what I always do is find a way to talk about me. And I talk about my story and growing up in the Bay and the punk rock scene and being the black gay kid in the neighborhood who was kind of like the Pee Wee Herman. You know what I mean? Driving around on my scooter. I drove my scooter here. You know, like driving around on my scooters and my suits and shit. You know what I mean? And being the underdog. So to this day, I'm attracted to underdog stories. You know, things that have that kind of that murder, death, kill world. Anything in that crime, you know, world. And if I could find the underdog way in and out of it, you got me. You know, it doesn't matter if it's sci-fi, if it's horror, if it's genre, you know, if it's comedy. I feel like I could do it as long as it's about an underdog in some way, you know, because I can relate to that.
Right now, you're writing for Mick Betancourt's show, and it's not just his show, but you know, that Deadly Class.
Yeah, Rick Remender and Miles Orion Feltzot. I can almost never say his middle name.
But your connection there, if I'm mistaken, is to Mick. Mick knows you. Mick wanted to bring you
Miles
in,
too.
right? Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
So what's that like? I mean, because in some ways, I'm going to do the best I can to explain this. In some ways, you're ahead of that, like, writer's room thing. But in other ways, you haven't really been down that path either. So it's like, you know, I'm working on these bigger projects as a producer, but why am I going to go sit in a writer's room? You know?
Well, I mean, there's been, after the writer's strike, well, the writer's strike changed a lot of people. You were talking earlier offline about, you have a friend of yours who was on your podcast, Phil, who is a writer, director, producer, or whatever, and she wrote a particular script. And I said, oh, she's a hyphenate, right? Which is what I consider myself to be. I think I introduced myself as a writer, director, producer, podcaster, whatever. I actually consider myself more of a writer, producer. Director's like the last thing that I consider. I'm really good at it, but I'm not trying to be Spielberg. I do it out of necessity. I do it because, you know, like there's something missing somewhere, and I just happen to have the right vision for it at the right time.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Not because I want to be some big director. So after the strike happened, I realized, oh my God, I can't ever let 6 months go by and I'm waiting for Hollywood again. So I'd written this script that had this pilot that had this little sequence of these 2 people stuck on a subway train, which is like about a 12, 15-minute sequence. This really intense moment. And I was walking, picketing at Paramount with one of my producer friends, and he said, Hilliard, I read your script. Man, that moment right there would be an interesting short or like a play or something. And I was like, why would I do that? And some reason, by the time the day was over, it hit me. I looked around. I was like, we don't know when this is going to end. So I was like, I need to be my own boss.
Right.
So I started my own company, started with that project. I put it together. You know, it's the thing about being in L.A., and I know you guys are a little bit more outside of L.A., but being in Hollywood, you know, you see I'm here right in the center of it all. Yeah. You can't not go to a coffee shop or somewhere else and not have met, or be at the gym and there's a DP friend of yours, you know, somebody else is a sound guy, whatever. So I put together this team. We all sat at the coffee shop one day, and I was like, here's what I want to do. And they read the script, and they're like, this is awesome. And it also happened at a time when, it was right during the time, if I recall, when Kanye West took the mic from Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
And I went, what if it was Kanye West type of character who was stuck on a subway train with his therapist, you know, as opposed to what it was in the script.
Right.
And I said, that would be interesting. And what it's about him revealing that he's gay. That's what his issue is, you know. So they end up on the subway train. The train breaks down in the middle of a tunnel, and it becomes a therapy session gone wrong. And so I ended up rewriting this whole thing for that, put this team together. We went and shot it, and which is right there, by the way, troublesome. And we went and shot it, and 6 months later we came out, and it got critically acclaimed. Yeah. And at the time I was teaching just like writing workshops and stuff at the Organization of Black Screenwriters. And I decided, having been someone who's taken tons of classes and read hundreds and actually thousands of scripts, I was like, if I ever taught one of the problems I have is like when you go to Truby and McKee and all those guys, and not to down those guys, but I have an issue with people who aren't doing it.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? And so I was like, I'm going to teach people from my own point of view. So I'll break down, like, for instance, Big or Kramer versus Kramer, but I'll say, here's a scene in Kramer versus Kramer where a character does this. I have a scene in this script that went to Sundance, right? Here's what I did, right? So I always give you an example of some classic and then give you an example of my own work. Mm-hmm. And the reason I did that is because I wanted you to know that I was in the trenches and that I'm working at it. I always have a hard time listening to somebody who just dissects film. You know, to me, that's a critic to me. And so if you actually do the work and you're still in it and you're still trying to sell scripts and you're still, you know what's current and what's going on. So I started teaching at the Organization of Black Screenwriters, and I would talk about how I made this film. Here are the bad things that went wrong, and here are the good things. Every time I hear somebody speak, they talk about all the great stuff they did. I'm like, something went wrong on the set. Like, tell us that. So I would tell people about logistics issues we had. Sure. I would tell them about problems we had. And then somebody after would go, dude, I'm writing this. I just wrote this cool thing. Would you read it? Would love for you to help me produce it. And then I'd go and produce that. And then I'd go and produce another one. Here I am since 2009. I've produced over 26 pilots, TV shows, all kinds of just independent things. So go back to where you asked me my question when we first started. I know I'm talking a lot here. I got my little protein drink.
You are the guest. Keep on guesting.
So the reason why I hadn't been on any network shows is because I was just making my own living, doing my own shit. You know, I was already producing things. Yeah. And for a while, there's a part of me that didn't kind of want to just be on staff. I kind of wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to be, and I'm used to being that. Yeah. But in 2018, I was kind of at a point where, you know, I have this beautiful office here and everything, and, you know, I'm enjoying myself here, and I got a lot of other projects I'm doing. It was just time to kind of move up the ladder a little bit. You know, I keep getting offered these little $200,000, $400,000 projects, and I'm like, I'm never going to get where I need to go if I keep doing the same stuff. Sure. So I was like, I need to get in the system. I need to get on a show. So Miles came over. He's one of the creators of the show, of Deadly Class. I had him on my podcast, and we talked about how they wrote and sold Deadly Class. And when it was over, he said, oh, by the way, I didn't tell you, but we got picked up. And I said, really? So Chris and I, who's my other co-host on the show, had made a pact at the beginning of 2018 that we would start asking for things. And so and we talked about this a lot. One of the things I realized, Phil, is sometimes your perception is what holds you back. Mm-hmm. So people see me, you know, I have my office on the lot. I drive a cool car. Yeah. I'm always kind of stylish or whatever. Yeah. So they assume my shit's going on. And it is to an extent. Yeah. I mean, I'm making a living. I'm doing fine. But I'm not anywhere where all my friends are at the table. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm still here trying to get some stuff. I'm not on the cover of Deadline like all they are. Yeah. Because of the projects I'm doing. Yeah. Right? So I was like, how can I change this? And well, I need to get in. So Miles was sitting here at the table. We had turned everything off, and he told me that they sold the show, and I just said, fuck it. Yeah. And I went, you know you need to hire me on the show, right? Yeah. And he looked at me like, you? And I was like, let me explain to you why. Yeah. So I proceeded to tell him what I was telling you earlier about here's my story. You know, I'm the kid who grew up in the Bay, you know, et cetera, the punk rock kid, the little Afro punk, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, dude, who else is going to know this world better than me? You know, I'm the guy who was at Fishbone. I was at Bad Manners. I mean, at Bad Brains and all these concerts. I danced in the fucking mosh pit. You know what I mean? I still go. You know, I was like, nobody's going to know this in San Francisco in 87 better than me. I was there. And he just looked at me and he went, you would be a staff writer? And I was like, yeah. And that's the other thing. I had to change the perception. Everybody thinks because I'm a producer level that I'm already there. And I was like, dude, I know my lane. Yeah. You know, whatever the lane is, I'll just roll with. Now, I got to tell you, when I got staffed and was sitting in a room and they would go do their sidebars, that was a little difficult for me because I'm used to being in the sidebars. So it was a little weird. I was like, I don't get to go? Yeah. So I was like, know your lane. Know your lane. You know what I mean? So it was an adjustment for me for sure, you know.
You do know San Francisco, though, because I could see that in the episode that we saw when we did your viewing party. It was fantastic. Right. But, like, you knew that he wanted an ice cream sandwich because he hasn't had an It's It. It was called a What's What in the show, but those things taste great. And if
Oh,
you
yeah.
haven't had one, it's something you're going to do. And then they were on the mission.
It was very 80s, too.
Right, yeah, for
exactly.
sure. They were on the mission. They were getting a burrito.
Right.
The places looked like the right places because you know in your head already what they look like, what they say, those kind of things.
Yeah. And, we also have, like I said, Rick and Miles, are, like Rick actually lived in San Francisco. I don't know I think he lived there in the 90s, if I recall. But he placed it there in the 80s in his book. It's based on a comic book. And he placed it there in the 80s, I think, because of the texture of things or the music and the style and all that it worked better for that, I believe. But I was actually in the scene in the 80s.
Yeah.
Going to all the clubs and the punk scenes and, all that in that time. From 84 to like 92
And like
or
one of
3,
the characters says the city. They don't say San Francisco,
No.
and they certainly don't say Frisco.
Depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, but I mean,
I would say Frisco.
In
I would
this
say
case,
Frisco,
though,
yeah.
saying the city was the
Right.
right thing to say.
Sure.
And if you're outside of San Francisco, you probably don't know that we all call it the city, but
Right.
that is what we call it.
Right.
That is, if you're from there, that's what you're going to say to your friends. Maybe you clarify to someone from out of town, but those little elements, that's why you should write on this show. You have that knowledge.
And season 2 introduces a mod character.
Look out now.
Which is crazy for me, so I'm like,
All going to tie
excited.
together.
Yeah.
Is that your idea?
No, it's in the book.
Oh, it's in the book. Okay.
Yeah. He's an interesting character, too. So it's going to be great. Have you seen the show?
I have not seen the
Okay.
show.
It's a trip.
But me growing up in Walnut Creek in the
Oh, you from the Bay, too?
yeah,
Okay.
so I left in '84,
Mm-hmm.
but I was more in kind of the skate punk scene,
Right.
starting going up and through Walnut Creek Intermediate to Los Lomas.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm intrigued now.
Right.
So I want to go back a little bit to
Okay.
this notion of water bottle tour.
Mhm.
Do you get a water bottle? Like, why is it called the water bottle tour?
Because every time you show up, the assistant walks up and says, "Can I get you something to drink?"
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of like when we
9
walked
times
in
out of
here.
10, somebody hands you a water bottle. And it's like usually a little tiny water bottle. So there's a lot of people who literally, you go into people's offices who have their own independent office, and they literally will have like a whole row of just water bottles that they've collected over the years as a
Memento, whatever. yeah.
memento.
And do they
Type
know
of thing.
like the date? And
I don't know. I've never seen that. I just have seen the water bottles like 12 years ago. I did this whole thing, and I still remember. So I keep them in memory of whatever. It's funny. I don't do that because it's not that deep.
Yeah. That's not your style anyhow.
No, it's not.
So what happens if you say no thanks? I don't want any water. I mean,
Well-
are you turning them off, or is that just a way to engage
No,
them?
I actually talked about that a lot. I remember I taught a actual class about going on your general interviews. First thing I always say because we talk about what things you should wear. We talk about, if they offer you a drink, should you take it? And I always say take it. And here's why. A lot of people fidget, right? So it gives you something to do. If you have something in your hand, it gives you something to just futz around with. And also, if you're in the middle of talking about something, your throat gets dry, you could just do this, take a little sip, and continue. Also, if you forget what the hell you were going to say, you could pause, take a breath, almost like you just lost your voice for a second. So it gives you something to play with if you're smart, and you make it, seamless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then you can do it. So I encourage people to take it, just as a prop.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So there is a little bit of thought behind. As soon as you walk in the door, you're on display.
Yeah,
Even though that's an
Right,
assistant.
the assistant's watching you too, because remember, the assistant's going to be them in like a year or two.
Right.
They're going to get moved up to junior. They're going to move,
Yeah.
So that's why they say be nice to the assistant, and it's a freaking 100% truth. I have watched so many assistants who are now vice presidents of companies.
Yeah.
Who I knew 8 years ago, who are now
Yeah.
one of them.
Somebody.
One of them was my mentor's assistant, who's now like the vice president of a huge company, and he may be 34. You know what I mean? But that's what happens.
Yeah.
But you got to be really smart and savvy to get that type of position. You got to be hungry.
Especially in that environment, because that's their gateway job.
Right.
But, they'll all say, I'll be goddamned if I'm going to stay here.
Right.
Watch me. I dare you to give me a chance.
Right.
And that's the person that, you're like, I'll take a water bottle. Thanks. I always try to think. Anybody who's got a thankless job, I always try to give them something.
Right.
It's easy to forget that they're there.
Yeah, and they're important. I have a lot of young, I don't know if you get a lot of young people who listen to your show, and maybe it's just the way that our industry is, but I mean, almost every time I tape a podcast now, there's always some young writer who's sitting, and I let them come and sit in and listen and watch. And they always, when it's over, they're like, Hilliard, I would love to just come and, have you mentor me and whatever. And I was like, dude, just stick around.
Yeah.
I'm so cool. I'm like, dude, I get here about noon. I'm here till about 7 days a week.
Yeah.
You can come in and sit here at the table. You can write.
Yeah.
You could be on the lot. You could do what I'm giving you access. You'd be surprised how many people actually show up. Hardly any.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the funny thing. They think, I don't want to impede on your time. I'm like, I told you, you could do it.
Yeah.
You got to jump. And that's what I'm looking for. And I always tell young writers, when I'm looking for in an assistant or an intern or whatever, is if I drop it, you pick it up.
Yeah.
You guys, you have military. Military?
No, but my dad.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that military thing where, somebody drops it, you grab it and you hit, you know what I mean? I just want you to, and I'm not telling you to be a slave. I'm telling you to be somebody who becomes somebody I need.
Yeah.
So you see, we're in the middle of a podcast, for example, and somebody's water's empty, just jump up and go grab it and refill it.
Yeah.
Be the person who's ahead so that I don't have to stop in the middle of it, go get my guest something.
Yeah.
Be that person.
Yeah.
So I always have these conversations with people. Like my producing partner is a big casting director, and every time she casts, every blue moon, her assistant can't be there because she has kids. She's like, Hill, would you come and help me run this casting session? I'm like, girl, please. And I'll come, and I'm like her freaking assistant. I'm already a producer.
Yeah.
So here's an example. We were casting a few years ago. Cedric the Entertainer had produced this show called The Cedric the Entertainer Show. It was called Just Rise or something like that. I don't know if they changed the title or not. And he was like this court judge. We taped like 8 independent episodes. And in the casting session, I literally was like, hey, what you need? Boom, boom. And I'd go get him stuff. And he's like, man, I sure could use a coffee. I'm like, I'd zoom across the street to the Starbucks or whatever, run back. I'm sweating and shit. You know what I mean? Doing whatever as her assistant. So Cedric turned to her. At one point, she goes, who is this assistant? I like this dude. Like this. She said, we need to have him on the set. And she said, Cedric, he's already a producer. And she said, what? And she said, this is what we do. When he's busy, I help him. And when he's busy, he helps me. So I tell that to all the young kids who hang out because I'm letting them know I work like that too when I work for my friends. So I'm not asking you to be my, I hate to use the word slave. It's such a derogatory sense. But you know what I mean? I'm asking you to step in and make it easy for me.
Right.
Whatever that means. I always say, think like a fish. And you and I talked about that when you moved in with your girl.
Yeah.
I was like, think like a fish. If she's clean, you better be clean. If she likes to sit down, you walk in and you fucking put the seat down. You know what I mean? Don't go into your old habits because I don't like it the way I like it. No, you moving into somebody's house, you gotta respect their stuff and you gotta adjust yourself to them, not them adjust to you.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So same thing in my office. I'm always like, keep my place. I'm like, keep my place clean.
I've been yelled at.
Keep my place clean. I'm giving you, it's pretty simple. You know what I mean? I keep everything just the way it is. I'm anal.
Yeah.
But
that's all right, though. I mean, it's one thing to be anal and be a dick about it and not tell everybody the rules. But if you tell them the rules, then it's like that. Now we know what he likes. Like what to expect.
Right.
And when
you can't be mad at somebody if you didn't tell them what the rules are.
Yeah. Right.
You
got to like, okay. And then they get a chance to mess it up. And then you're like, okay, look, here are actually no shit the rules. It's not going to change. This is how I like it. Right. When you run a room, when you're running a show or any kind of project, I mean, that's the same thing, right? Like you need to be even keeled as much as possible so they know that like these are the bounds and this is what's expected. And it doesn't change. I mean, there are people that run their world that way with a lot of chaos and tension and
some people like it that way.
Yeah.
Like one thing I love about with Mick and Rick and Miles, I mean, day one, they're like, here's the rules of the game.
Right.
You have to tell your room what you expect. You were asking me earlier, in my own life, I've ran my own small rooms.
Yeah.
So I've had producers hire me to write like pilots for them, and I'll put together a small room with like 2 or 3 other young writers just to help me break story. I go off and write it, but I just sometimes just need to bounce things off, or sometimes they give you a little bit of something you hadn't thought of. And so I've run lots of those rooms, probably about 7 or 8 of them, and it helps you to understand how to work with people, because being a writer can be very independent and lonely, if you will. And that's why a lot of film writers, I don't mean to change the subject at all, but I get into it with a lot of film writers. I don't get into it, but I have this discussion A lot of film writers want to move into TV now because that's where everything's going. Well, what happens is the first question I ask them is, how fast does it take you to write a script? And they're like, oh, month or two, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, work on your speed.
Yeah.
Because, for example, on our show, and I'm not giving away any politics, but sometimes when they're in production, they will move an episode to another episode because of the schedule. So that episode you had planned to write that doesn't start till the week later got pushed back. So now you have to start on yours now. And because the way production's going, they need to start shooting scenes that are all blocked in that spot. So that means they need a script in like 3 or 4 days. So sometimes you have to write it fast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you have to be working on it now is what I'm always encouraging film writers. You want to move it in TV, you got to give yourself a deadline of like, write the hell out of your outline and then give yourself a week. Start with like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then start training yourself to write it in a week.
Yeah.
And even shorter if you have to. But your speed has to be at a place where your first draft looks really strong. You know what I mean? It's hard to do, but I believe that the more you work on it, for example, I just turned in this new limited series that me and my producing partner Pamela are doing about this woman named Kathy Williams, who's the first documented Negro woman I say Negro woman because that's back what they called it back in the 1800s, who, in order to escape slavery, she disguised herself as a man and fought with the Buffalo Soldiers. Okay. So we're doing this freaking amazing, 8-part series on her. And she was enslaved, a soldier to millionaire, and all the while she was sickly, and she just had all this heartache and stuff that happened to her, and her life is so interesting. She was only in the military for 2 years, but everybody talks about her being this Buffalo Soldier. So we decided to focus on what happened to her before, during, and after. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's this amazing story. So literally, I think we spent 3 months researching and deciding what the story was going to be, writing the outline, and maybe a week and a half writing the script.
Right.
But that's because the more research you do, the more you know it. And I don't want to use the word easy, but it should be more seamless to do it.
The impact on quality. Right. If you have time to write something and be particular, how is that changed by picking up the pace? I mean, obviously you're going to build the capacity to do it fast, but overall, like Ocean's 11, that quick patter at that. Right. Can you write that fast?
I think it depends on what it is. I've found that a lot of those Oscar scripts that you hear about, they're usually written pretty fast. And it's only because they're usually passion projects. Passion projects come to you. Yeah. They usually hit you in a way that it just rolls out of your body. Like my Black Wall Street script, I think I spent 3 months researching the crap. I think I wrote that in 2 weeks maybe. Oh. You know what I mean? Now there have been more drafts. I'm giving you the first draft version.
Yeah. You're always grabbing something and always polishing.
You're always polishing. Yeah, so I think it just depends on what the project is. But I believe that you need to be working on your speed just because that's how this industry is. And if you don't teach yourself how to turn things in, even if you don't have an appointment, like if I'm writing a spec script on something, some new idea, that like the Kathy Williams story, that was just an idea that we decided we wanted to do. Yeah. No producer wanted to hire us to do that, but we still had our deadlines. We knew we were going to take this much time to do it. Now we're doing one right now on Emmett Till, a little 8-part series, but it's going to be from different perspectives of each person, who was involved. Yeah. The lady who accused him, we go home with her. Yeah. The 2 guys who took him. And interesting. People don't know there was a black guy there at the team who was with them too. Yeah. We follow him. So there's all these different true detective type of things we're going to follow. Yeah. So I'm deep in research on that right now. I already see the whole pilot, and I'm starting to see, as I do more research, I'm starting to see where the episodes go. I know what episode 2 and 3 is. Now I have to decide how it goes up to 4 to 8. I know the court is probably the last episode, though.
Yeah. I like your whole theory about you're controlling your own destiny.
Yes.
So throughout your entire career, it sounds like you are not waiting for someone to hand you a job. Mm-hmm. And the writers...
That's that Bay Area thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, the writer's strike reinforced that for you. You're like, hey, I'm going to start taking control of my own destiny. Mm-hmm. And that's been kind of a double-edged sword for you because it's kind of kept you in this little niche, right, where people perceive you as, hey, he's pretty successful. He's producing, he's writing, and you almost feel like, from what I'm hearing, you need to get that additional, get out of the $400,000 budget projects and attach yourself to a larger project so that you can now take that next level and say, hey, look, yes, I'm attached to this, and then now your $400,000 projects become multi-million-dollar projects.
Absolutely. Like the next thing we're doing, like Sylvester is like a $6 to $10 million project, you know, so that's more like where I'm trying to go. I want to be on the cover of Deadline.
Yeah.
You know, it's like me and my producing partner Pamela have this thing that everything we write, we want to get nods for.
Yeah.
So we're trying to write that well. We want to compete, at the Golden Globes and the Oscars and the Emmys. We don't just want to write for the sake of writing a cool idea. We want to write something that people are going to be like, dude, did you guys see that? That's good. You know what I mean? So over the years, our style, I always tell people your style changes too. So I've talked to you about this a few times on your show. If you ever sit behind me when I'm writing, I have the script up, the outline for the next script I'm writing, and minimized, I'll have a script from like 6-7 years ago that I wrote. And the reason I do that is so that I'm always moving forward. So by the end of the year, I have 7 or 8 scripts I've written. Most people have like 1 or 2. That way, I'm constantly moving forward. And so when I'm here writing, my alarm goes off at 45 minutes in. So that script I was working on, I stop. I work out for about 15, 20 minutes, usually about 10. And just do quick supersets, boom, 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 boom. Go back, switch to the outline, 45 minutes, alarm goes off, work out, boom, 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 switch, move to that old script. And the reason I go to the old script is who you were a year ago isn't who you are now. So the way you write right now, you might enter your characters a different way. You might write them the way you describe them. The way you describe the actions may be a little different. So I'll go back and go, I'm using this really cool device now where, the way I describe the characters is this way. Back then, it was a lot more simpler. I just said, he was tall and blah, blah. Now I'm describing the accent on the shirt, you know what I mean, or whatever it is. So it really paints a prettier picture, if you will. It's almost more poetic sometimes, And so, but that's where my style is now. In 2 years, it might be different,
right.
So why not go back and, especially the scripts you really like that you just haven't sold yet, that still may have some legs. I'll literally go back and pull them out and give them a new spin on who I am. And the reason I have so many scripts also is sometimes those scripts, I'll have an idea that it used to follow this character. It's like, what if it's on this character now? So I have a whole nother version. Like I have a script about this cop in San Francisco in the gang unit, and I moved it to London and focused on another character. You know what I mean? So there's cool things you can do depending on the setting. Like one of the things I always talk about is whenever you get a bump in your road when you're writing a script, I always tell people change the weather. You'll be amazed how people react to a storm coming down and how they react when it's sunny and beautiful outside. That argument will completely change.
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show.
You'll be amazed how people react to a storm coming down and how they react when it's sunny and beautiful outside. That argument will completely change.
You've taught me is also to change the character. Like you're going to write and you're going to see things in your own eyes. At least that's how I do it. Mm-hmm. And when you put somebody else, a black dude in there, in that character, you're like, oh my God, the whole story's different now. Mm-hmm. Because it's not just me and my perspective. It's this whole new, there's all this whole, who his uncles were. All these things come in and they change that person. Right. And it can be anything. It can be, the person can be from the East Coast, the West Coast, the South, whatever it is. And you have a completely new dynamic.
Culture. Culture is going to change the way it is. I mean, I remember telling my reps when I first signed with them, I know that the 2 projects I gave you have black people in the lead, but please know I'm more than that. Yeah. And I had to explain to him, I says, my husband is 10 years older than me. He's a white guy, very successful. And I live in a different world than most people you think would live.
Right.
And so my entire life, I've been an outsider, my entire life. And I always say this is really important, talking to 2 white guys. We live in your world. You don't have to live in ours.
Good point.
So we probably know more about you than you would of us. So don't assume just because there's a white character here, oh, well, we need another white guy. No, we probably can write that. You know what I mean? For you to write ours is where we're like, well, he could write that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they really did the research. And that's why I give so much credit personally. This is my own personal take on the NWA movie. Because that white girl, the two white girl and the white guy wrote that movie, and they fucking nailed it. And to me, I'm like, see, because they were smart. They sat in the room with Ice Cube and Dre and got the game and hung out with them and saw what was going on and heard the vernacular. And if you could do that, you can mimic anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just one of those people. I'm like, I don't care if you're black, white, or whatever. Just do your research properly. You know what I mean? If you do your research properly, you will be fine. And that, to me, is a good example. I'm sure there were issues people had. For me, I thought they nailed it.
Yeah.
You know, Green Book, other problems.
That sounds like a whole nother show.
Whole nother show.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that you work out after you have your 45-minute alarm goes off, because I'm just meeting you for the first time. But what I'm hearing is, you know, you're self-made and you don't let other things get in the way, and you check your ego where you see you need to really be in somebody else's fishbowl, to use your analogy, and you know how to adapt yourself enough so that you can fit in to get to where you need to get to. And that to me is
yeah, it's wise. A little bit of, you know, black people talk about it a lot. It's a little bit of code switching. I mean, I could sit here and talk to you guys and sound like I'm pretty educated. I'm not. You know, I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't go to college. I got in a couple writing programs at USC and stuff like that, but that's my extent of college, period. So my insecurity, my imposter syndrome, I still deal with it all the time because I'm surrounded by super smart, very educated people everywhere I go, and my husband's in politics. So I'm always surrounded by these super smart Harvard, you know, people who are in the I can't stand politics, you know what I mean? And so I'm always checking myself. But where I'm comfortable is I've realized where my strength is. And my strength is in the work that I do and the way that I write and the stories that I like to tell. I feel like when people read my scripts, they are moved. And that's the key. You know, if I can get them to be moved because I felt like I was moved when I wrote it, then I feel like I'm going to get them that way too. And if you're honest on the page, I can tell when somebody's lying on the page. That's the truth. And it's because you weren't being real. For example, I'm just going to use an example. You haven't written it. I'm just spitballing. If you gave me a script and it's about the military, and I know a lot of your stuff, and say there was something where something happened in a situation where you guys were over, you know, in Iraq or wherever, and you got out of the situation really easy.
Yeah.
I'd be like, that couldn't have happened that way.
Yeah.
The only way that could happen is the Pete that I know with the mouthpiece you have. Your mouthpiece probably could have saved you. Yeah. But if you would have just got away just because they all of a sudden were afraid of, you know, 7 soldiers. And so that's what I'm saying is I can tell when you're holding back because you didn't want to show something or you didn't want to give up something. Yeah. And sometimes that shows on the page. You know, you could just feel it because you're like, something's not authentic here. I'm not feeling something. They got out of this situation too easy. He got the girl too easy. Whatever it is, there's no stakes. Yeah. You know? And so that's what I'm always looking for. And the more I'm always encouraging you, because I know you have some scripts you want to write. Yeah. I'm always encouraging you. The more you read them, the more you see the patterns. You go, oh, this isn't, I don't want to say not as hard, but the more you see it, the more you understand that and the more it makes sense to you.
Tying in the workout in between, from a creative process, whether it's writing scripts or just having that timeline and the pressure to be creative, that just doesn't happen overnight, right? So that takes, whether you're creating art that you're going to sell or writing a script, writing a book, that type of discipline, that's like working out. You have to work out those muscles. If you take 3 months off from going to the gym and you go into the gym, work out for an hour, that's going to impact you for the next week.
Totally.
But if you're in the gym 4 or 5 days a week, then, hey, you know what? You can do twice as many reps as you did.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I love the analogy you just gave. I use this analogy every single year. So I talk about how I learned this from Paul Gio. You still got to get Paul on your show.
Yeah, for sure.
He's been back and forth to St. Louis a lot, but I believe he's coming back soon. We did an episode last year. We talked about goals and plans. Every year people make a goal. I stopped doing that. It's because of Paul. I didn't realize I've been calling it a goal, but I meant it was a plan the whole time. So, for example, using your diet thing, a lot of people go to the gym and they go around January, February because it's the new year. Everybody wants to lose weight, right? And nobody stays with it. I mean, almost zero people. And here's why. Gyms make their most money at this time. So what happens is you go to the gym, and I'm going to tie this back to screenwriting and stuff.
All right.
So you go to the gym, you sign in, you work out, and you like the last time you were there 3 years ago, you were lifting 45s. So you probably start putting those 45 backs on, right? So you put on some 45s, you're showing off. Boom, you're like, I can still do this. Well, you come home later on that day, you wake up in the morning, you're sore. So then you're like, oh, I'll go on Thursday. Today's Monday. Then Thursday comes. You're still a little sore.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on Monday. Monday comes. Oh, I got to go drop my wife out of blah, blah. You start coming up with all these excuses because you didn't push through the soreness.
Yeah.
Right?
I got to do this on Wednesday, and I can't be sore, so I can't work out on Monday.
Exactly.
Right.
Whatever the thing is. But you also know from being people who take care of the bodies, if you're sore now, you do two things. You work on another body part, or you lift lighter weights, still pushing through the soreness, right? Because your body has to get you. It's in shock. That's why it's growing. People just think, oh, I'm too sore to do it. No, that's when you really want to push. So to tie it into screenwriting, people do the same thing. You start to write on a script, and then you stop because you don't know what to do. Instead, you should be pushing through it, meaning I always tell people you could be doing 4 things. You could be reading, you could be writing, you could be watching. We have Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff. Or you could be listening to. We have podcasts now. So there's always something you could be doing. So you don't have to be writing every day. You could just be turning on Screenwriters Rant Room. You could turn on Paper Team, John August Show, all of that. There's so many other ones that you could just be listening to game and getting more and more food, if you will. But people choose not to do that. They just go, oh, I can't do this today. I have a writer's block. No, you don't. You're being lazy, So as the independent person, as you were talking a moment ago, I don't believe in that. So if I have a day when I can't write, I'm listening, I'm watching, I'm doing one of those 4 things. I'm listening, I'm watching, I'm reading, or writing. If I'm not writing, I'm just doing those 3 things. Okay. Sorry. And then vice versa. If I can't read today, I'm listening. If I can't listen, it's always something. So I wake up in the morning, and I turn on a podcast as I'm getting dressed, after I get out of the shower. So I'm constantly, for that 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I got something planned. I get in the car, I don't turn on the music, I turn on a podcast so that I keep myself moving. Go on, you're about to say something.
No, that was the whole thing is I always want to ask you, like, what does it take to get that word on the page, whichever word it is. But there's this whole, your life, the work, lifting these weights. It all feeds that machine that kicks out the words.
Well, that's an adrenaline thing. It's because I'm not going outside.
Right.
9 times out of 10, I bring my own lunch. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I'm not going outside. So that's my walk around the lot is boom, boom, quick little whatever. Yeah. I get rejuvenated again like you do on a walk. So that gives me, now I can switch gears. Yeah. Now I can move to the outline, which is a totally different genre than the 1800 thing I'm doing. Now I'm doing something contemporary.
And you didn't start with this pattern. You built it.
I learned it.
Yeah, like that's not working. That's not working. Right. This works. Okay, I'll keep. And you just eventually evolve into that, and that's part of that development process that you clearly got down because you were always juggling 6 things. Always.
Yeah, I got 6 things coming in the door right here. So.
Yeah. With that said, I want to respect your time. Do you have a last question at all, or?
So you're a multitasker. You're good at multitasking. Was that something that you were born with, or is that something that was learned? And do you see your approach? Is that something that you would teach to somebody, or is that an individual thing that some people are good at it, some people aren't?
I think it's an individual thing. I came from San Francisco where we all sat at the coffee shop because it's cold. So I'd be sitting there writing poetry and stuff before I knew I was going to be a writer. And I got used to the sounds. I have really good hearing. I hear everything. Like my neighbors down the hall, I hear them having conversations. I'm like, ooh, they're doing that show? Literally, the doors are closed. And so I've taught myself chaos. I work in chaos, which is why my office looks the way. I need energy. I need to see things. I need to look out the window and see the hills. You know what I mean? And I always have my music on. I got several different things running in my head all the time. That was a difficult thing about being in a writer's room is everybody's in there with a notepad and they're like, Pete, give me 3 ideas on Marcus's character. You're like, okay, you just fucking got to come up with it. I like to pull out my computer, scroll through some shit through the 80s, see a bunch of dudes skating and go, oh, I know what it is. You know what I mean? I need to be sparked by stuff.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was an adjustment, going into a room where you just have to just all in your head. Like, I'm not that dude, and I'm much more visual, you know, where I get inspiration.
Some stimulus or something.
Yeah, watching some cool, you know, old movie that had all the kids in the 80s in there, and I'm like, oh, now that one of those characters did that same thing in here, which is kind of how we spun off and did the episode. I don't know if you saw the episode we did about the Breakfast Club, you know, because we were all talking about cool 80s things. We're like, what if we did a, you know what I mean?
Totally, yeah.
So, so that came out of that. So I'm curious to see what we're going to do next season, because I know there's a bunch of other movies and TV shows that we
Weird
have.
science episode.
Who knows? Who knows?
By the way, Hilliard Guess, it's always awesome to have you on, man. I love it. It brings a big smile on my face. You guys got to check out Deadly Class and SyFy. It's super cool. If you like comic books at all, graphic,
action.
It's so good. Yeah.
I didn't say what it's about. It's about a school of deadly assassins.
Right.
You know, so it's a lot of fun.
There's a lot of action in it. So we give you thanks. I appreciate you so much.
Thanks, guys.